Hello and welcome to the Terrace Scottish Football Podcast. You are being treated to a smorgasbord of terracists this week as we recap the 6 games that took place on Saturday in the SPFL Premiership. Joining me today to begin with, it's just us two doing the first 2 games. It's Rob Borthwick.
Hello, Duncan.
Hi Rob, how are you doing?
Yeah, very well, all considering. All things considered, yes. So let's just start then with the game that took place, that kicked off the Saturday's card. I'm still a bit confused. Obviously it makes sense to play the games on Saturday, but I was completely thrown by no games on Boxing Day whatsoever. Not sure I actually liked it. But then there was also that thing of having all 6 games on a Saturday was actually really nice. So I'm a bit, I'm a bit torn. But the weekend kicked off at Easter Road capacity Easter Road Stadium as Hibs defeated Hearts 3-2. Goals from Jamie McGrath, Josh Campbell and Kieran Bowie put the Hibs on easy street until they decided to do what Hibs normally do and make life difficult for themselves with 2 goals in the final 15 minutes from Lauren Shanklin and Cammy Devlin. Made this a game where even some Hibs fans came away slightly upset about it, which is mental because Hearts fans never seem to really be bothered about playing terribly and winning games or what have you. But Rob, how was it for you? I assume that you're still in convalescence, so didn't quite make it along to the game and were treated to the game on Sky Sports, which I thought actually was a really top-notch production as things go. But yeah, Rob, what were your immediate thoughts on the derby? Yeah. So I hate not going to games, and obviously with my current ankle surgery recovery predicament, I've been confined to watching all Hearts games on TV, which sucks. Especially derbies, man. Like it's see if Hearts are going to lose a derby, I'd rather be there and fully taste it and experience it. Do you know what I mean? It's quite a weird one, but
it's weird because also when you're there and if you're with mates and stuff like that you get out of. I think you get out of a derby defeat a lot easier because you're maybe off to do something afterwards, or just generally there's a lot of gallows humour that you get from that. And you're just like, and you're already thinking, right, well, actually, it's only Tuesday's next game, sort of thing. There's certainly more of that than when you're just stewing in your house, I suppose.
It's like an immediate therapy session, which I wasn't afforded, unfortunately.
Yeah. And there's always someone that's taking it a lot worse than you are as well. Like genuinely, there's someone that's going like, I'll never be back. I'll never darken my door. Like that's and you're like, well, okay, I'm not that far away.
To be fair, it's like my time like working at the SPFL and working in football and working at Hearts and stuff. It's like I have kind of like trained myself not to let defeats ruin my weekend, and this is. To get into the game, this is another example of that, I think. Hibs were excellent, I think, for 75 minutes. But at the same time, Hearts were very much the creators of their own downfall in certain areas as well. I think, you speak to any Hearts fan before the game and you're thinking, right, Nicky Cadden's starting on the left. Don't allow him onto his left foot and get a ball into the middle. And after 2.5 minutes, he's allowed to do that. And I think that, Derek McInnes speaks a lot of sense, I think, before and after games. And he said what everyone was thinking and what I was thinking, certainly, in that Hearts this season have been phenomenal at the basics. And that's a big reason why we are where we are. We defend our lines. We play it through midfield. We get the ball into the middle for our attacking players to score goals. The basics have been excellent. And on Saturday, we kind of abandoned that. The basics weren't getting done. There was a lot of scrappy, balls being played directly out of play, handing over possession to Hibs. And a massive fair play because every single time that happened, Hibs punished Hearts. They were clinical. I said in group chat earlier on, all 3 finishes from a Hibs point of view were superb. Jamie McGrath making I'm only going to give Hearts comparisons, but making a Paul Hartley-esque run into the box. Late run, which completely foxed Cammy Devlin, and then a finish on a half volley. Superb. The second goal, Josh Campbell making a very similar run into the middle, and it's a fantastic header. We know he's really good in aerial situations already. But that was a great goal. And then obviously the pressure and the pressing, getting to Stuart Findlay, giving the ball away, and Kieran Bowie, just clinical. That's what you want your striker to do. As soon as he's put in that position, shift it onto your left foot and give the keeper no chance. That's exactly what he did.
So Hearts were, it's not often you get punished for every single mistake. But if that's going to happen, you don't want it to happen in a derby, and it's exactly what did happen. I thought Hibs were well worth their 3 points, even though, somehow we could have quite easily snatched a draw from that game. You look at the chances that Hearts had, and that's a big positive from Hearts' season. Even in the games that we haven't been as good. You look at the Motherwell game where we were the exact same situation, 3-0 down, and in the end we should have won it. We actually got that back to 3-3, and then we hit the post, and then Ward made a phenomenal save. In this game, 3-0 down, brought it back to 3-2, and even after that, considering the fact that Cammy Devlin scored in the 89th minute, we had another 2 or 3 chances to score a goal in the game. So that's where I take a bit of heart from. That's where the sort of ease of sort of disappointment in the loss comes from, because we are still showing that, even if we are playing, and that is the worst we've played this season, even if we're playing that badly, we're giving ourselves opportunities to get points and to get something from the game. But, all said and done, it doesn't make it any easier. You never want to lose a derby. But as I say, I think Hibs over the course of the 90 minutes were fully deserving. And if anything, probably it's a missed opportunity for Hibs to really put Hearts to the sword and stick a big figure up against them, because if Josh Mulligan squares that at 3-0 and makes it 4, then that could have been a cricket score. I think that should be a disappointment from Hibs' point of view, but you can never be disappointed with an Edinburgh derby win.
No, I think obviously Edinburgh derbies haven't had a reputation, and rightly, because most of them have been absolute dog shit for the vast majority of them are. This was one where the first half quality was the goals were good, but the overall quality wasn't. It was heading into that sort of battle area, but often you get so many Edinburgh derbies where there's not even goals being scored. I suppose coming into this game, I wasn't particularly confident from Hibs' perspective, just because I think at this stage of the season we've been absolute par. We've not we've beaten everyone we should be beating, and then our record so far against you guys, against Celtic, against Rangers, and and Motherwell away has been poor. It's that sort of thing. And I think I suppose this weekend demonstrates so much. It is what you're alluding to, what Derek McKinnon said. This is a league where you have to turn up and you have to do the basics every single week. Otherwise, there are people that are more than willing to pinch your pockets. And that and Hibs did that. That it did take Hearts to be off note. But again, there's been plenty of derbies where Hearts have turned up in good form and been not great, and Hibs haven't been able to take advantage of that. So that is gratifying, but it's only what was required now is to kick on from Hibs' perspective. And I think even you saw the substitutions were interesting from David Gray. I mean, obviously the Nicky Cadden one was enforced, and I know that Tony certainly was at that point. Right, well, that's it. That's any of the scoring chances gone, and then lo and behold, Josh Cameron comes up with that exquisite header. But you could see how that beyond that we were relatively limited, and that it was down to great work, and tenacity and hard work creating those chances, as opposed to be anything particularly well worked. It was about chasing things down. The decision to take off Josh Mulligan and replace him with Joe Newell, I think what felt to me like that was the game changer in terms of where the momentum really started to shift, because I'm not really sure what the thinking was there really, because Mulligan was moving the game on as well. He was involved in absolutely everything, but he was also wanting to progress further, and Barlaser would sit behind that sort of thing. If I didn't really understand, in terms of, I don't think you necessarily needed Barlaser and Newell in there, and I think that's what that allowed Hearts in game. And obviously there was a lot of changes made by McInnes that did that, and I think you will probably regret the way that he chose to tinker with things, in terms of the lineup. But at the same time, Hibs were there to take full advantage.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, because when Lawrence Shanklin scored, and obviously it's a completely different scenario, but I saw similarities to what happened at Tynecastle earlier in the season when we ended up getting the win in a game that was absolutely a 0-0. It's the most 0-0 of games. But Hibs dropped back 5 or 10 yards, and they did it again in this game. And the substitution and Newell coming on was a wee bit later than that, obviously. But even then, I was like, what are you doing? Like, you've got Hearts exactly where you want them. You don't have to drop back. And I think that it was a mixture of those two things, because, we put Casaridis onto the left-hand side, which is easily his favoured side. Up against Megwa, and then obviously Chris Cadden when he came on for Megwa as well. We moved Harry Milne back to left centre-back, which made a big difference. We brought in Saba Kirjota, and all of a sudden, we were flooding the box. We were getting opportunities. Benny Bedingame made a huge difference.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bedingame's phenomenal. When he was able to get his foot on the ball. And it's, there was a few things that contributed to that last 15 minutes where realistically Hearts were very much the team in the ascendancy. Hibs had one opportunity on the break, which was sort of squandered by Cleege. But yeah, it was a funny one. It was almost like both managers were set up to give us a grandstand finish. It's like they wanted it. It's like they wanted it to happen. It's like, Hearts finally got their best sort of 11 in the right positions on the pitch, and David Gray went, right, okay, let's defend what is essentially an absolute tap-in of 3 points, and that's what kind of led to where it was. But I think that the final word on a really good Hibs display has to go to Salinger. He sold the jerseys for Cammy Devlin's goal, but then all of a sudden he pulls off 2 fantastic saves, one from Shanklin, one from Benny, to secure the 3 points. And I think that's the sign of a good goalkeeper. If you do make a mistake, you come back and make sure it doesn't happen again, and that's exactly what he did to keep the 3 points in Leith.
Yeah, I think overall it's one of those derbies where both sets of fans can take something from it, and that maybe that's not meant to sound as patronising as maybe it should. And I hope that's not how it's coming across. I think because there's those elements of like, there was positives around Challenger, but also he's not flawless. That he didn't look comfortable in the first half, a couple of corners and things like that. So there was few players on the Hibs side who gave a fully rounded performance. That's madness that you've got someone like Cleege that you come on, but like £1 million on the bench, but doesn't do it. But then again, there was players that Hearts started, they paid big money for and didn't perform. And there's this. It's interesting that Hearts can come away thinking, okay, well, if that's the worst we ever played the rest of the season, then we should be all right. But I think also there was a big demonstration there about where Hearts have been able to get the squad building better than Hibs. In terms of like the options that Hearts had off the bench were able to change the game, and that I'm not entirely convinced that Hibs at this moment can say that that's where we're sitting. Where you're bringing on kind of like for like players, or there's not anyone that's going to make the same changes that the Hearts did. Albeit you can have guys like Claudio Braga having an absolute stinker, but it was that thing. I think it was just a game where too many of the Hearts stalwarts for this season, Cammy Devlin, you put Kingsley in this one as well. Just they didn't have a great game, and this was not the time that where you want them to have games where they don't show up. So I think that's does that cover as much as we need to say on that? Like it's hard to say, isn't it? It was one of those ones actually. Far be it from me to do this willingly, but where you don't even really notice the referee. Which is quite something. Like, so John Beaton, I would say, and never knowingly praised him in the past, but actually I thought he stayed out of the way of it a bit, and the game was allowed to flow, but it didn't get too het up. It was a good derby in that regard, in terms of it didn't become just broken up by a bunch of series of fouls either.
Yeah, I think Hearts fans detest John Beaton because he is. He has a certain reputation amongst Hearts fans, and certainly if you look at the stats of number of yellow cards, red cards, number of wins that Hearts have had with John Beaton as referee, we're not his biggest fan. And I know that a lot of Hearts fans were still moaning about him a wee bit, but I think it's not one of his worst displays. He did let the game run. I think that The fact he only gave one yellow card in the game as well shows that he maybe had that in mind before the game. It's a derby, it is going to be blood and thunder, kind of let the boys play kind of thing. And he did do that, but it will be a cold day in hell before I give John Beaton any praise. So take it for that what you will. But yeah, I think the last thing that I would say is that most right-minded Hearts fans have taken this defeat in a reasonably positive way. I think that's because of the sheer amount of credit in the bank that McInnes and the players have got. We're going to go into...
In a way that maybe a Neil Critchley might not have. If they,
don't ever...
but another... Yeah.
Don't ever say his name in front of me, please. No, I think that, we're going into the new year having lost 2 games. And we will, at the very worst, be joint top of the table come the 1st of January. So things are still looking pretty rosy, but you never want to lose a derby, and certainly that will be something that will need rectified come February, March time, I think, is the next derby. So,
yep.
A begrudging hands up and fair play. That was a well-deserved win for Hibs.
Well, speaking of your challengers to top of the table, the second televised game on Saturday was at the home of the Set Fair Arena, still a ludicrous name for a ground, Ammon Vale to everyone else, where we had, I'm not sure how we're going to describe this, but Livingston were beaten 4-2 by Celtic, but we had 4 goals in the first 10 minutes. Christian Montano scoring in the 3rd minute, followed by Benjamin Mirren equalising, then Montano popping up again, followed by Yang equalising, and then Negan scored a fantastic goal 31 minutes in, and then there was Arne Engels penalty, and that after 39 minutes, and that was the end of the scoring action at the game. In a way, if you're a Hearts fan, which you are, you'll coming away after that game and then watching Celtic, it's got to be fairly confident, because I'm not sure many other teams. I don't know. Celtic are just very concerning. That's all that can come to me at the moment. If I was a Celtic fan, obviously.
I think you're a Hibs fan, so you're halfway there. So I think that sorry. No, I think Wilfred Nancy is really beginning to show his hand about what his Celtic team are going to look like. And for a neutral, it's going to be so much fun. It's going to be so entertaining, because you've got a team that, honestly, in an attacking sense, is reminiscent of Ange Postecoglou's best. They flood forward. They create so many opportunities. The players are now looking, in an attacking sense only, they are now looking like they know what they're meant to be doing. They're getting into the right spaces. Benjamin Mirren is, he's been inconsistent this season, but he's a midfielder who, when he gets in the right positions, has got really, really good goal-scoring instinct. And he's shown that again in this game with 2 very obviously different goals. But they're so entertaining going forward. And at the back, they are atrocious. They're so bad. I mean, Christian Montano, for both goals, Yang and Anthony Ralston, I mean, are they just at the side of the pitch having a chat with each other? Like, I have no idea where they are. It's almost like they're not ever even in frame for these goals. And Liam Scales is, sort of... He's running around trying to sweep everything up, but that means that he's never in the right position either, which means that Livingston, bottom of the table, Livingston got a swathe of chances in this game. They got the ball into the box over 30 times. They were able to have 13 shots from inside the penalty area. And this is Livingston, who, with all due respect, look like they are the favourites for the drop, because they've not really been able to kick on and create opportunities this season. Celtic were giving them every opportunity to try and get something, but obviously with the sort of attacking firepower that they have, they were way too strong for a Livingston team that has been leaky at the back this season. So, for a neutral, Wilfred Nancy, welcome to Scotland, man. This is going to be a great laugh. This is going to be very entertaining. For a Celtic fan, the alarm bells will still very much be ringing. 4 defeats on the bounce, obviously, to start with, but then against Aberdeen, absolutely battered the Aberdeen goal, and then lost an equaliser from just a simple ball through the middle. We're able, obviously, to win that game. Aberdeen down to 10 men, having an impact. And then in this game, going down twice, but still able to win the game. Like, it's just going to be a wild ride, I think. But at the same time, if they do sort out the defensive side of things, then, you know, I think they already are massive favourites for the title anyway. But if they sort out the defensive side of things, then they should be really setting themselves in decent stead under Nancy, because he's got them playing a very up and at them attacking play of football.
Yeah, I think it's one of those things. Feels like it's on a bit of a knife edge in terms of, you know, if Celtic had a clinical scorer, you know, they weren't relying on Kenny, they would have probably been out of sight in a number of these games, and it suddenly looks, you know, they look like the great entertainer sort of thing. But it's the bluntness of that. So there is that almost sense of why they're pushing forward so much and trying to create these chances, because they know they're not necessarily going to put them away, and that's. But you would imagine the easier thing to do would be to sort of the defence and buy a good striker, and you do things incrementally. There is a certain degree of arrogance in terms of coming in and doing it this way mid-season when you're already it's different, obviously, because Celtic and Rangers tend not to. Well, Rangers actually now do have to do a lot, but it tends to be not having to do mid-season changeover. But coming and wanting to impose this place that would be fine in a normal season, I suppose, where But this is a high risk maneuver from a board, especially, that don't seem to want to do any sort. They don't even really care about low risk sort of stuff. You know, it's like, oh yeah. So it's absolutely fascinating to do it with a squad who is possibly the poorest Celtic squad in quite a while. And it doesn't seem that there's anyone, you know, that there's not. I just don't get the sense that there's people on the fringes of that squad that are really pushing themselves forward to, you know, the fringes of the squad are people like James Forrest. You know, like, you know, it's not. And Paulo Bernardo, you know, it's not a great vintage, and that I think that's would be massively concerning. I mean, and even if it's a weird one where a new keeper comes in, concedes 2 goals in the first 10 minutes, and you don't actually necessarily think it was his fault, like, because the defending was that bad. Like, you know, like, okay, right, that's that, you know. And he seemed, Sincel had an all right game. Like, you know, it was difficult to. So much of this game was just utter nonsense, and like there was some goalmouth scrambles that wouldn't look out of place in an under 12s game. Like, you know, genuinely, like it was that sort of disorganised. But and in terms of, I think Livingston, that was Ryan McGowan coming back in. That's when you look at that team on paper. I mean, and obviously they've been signing a few players already, which seems interesting. You know, again, just Livingston doing Livingston things, so you're never quite sure whether the spin of the tombola is a big thing or not. But, you know, that's not the starting 11 for Livy is not necessarily a bad team. I just don't know whether you're going to get them playing consistently enough and injury free enough, I suppose, would be the bigger concern to do anything, because, you know, they're going to be very soon almost cut adrift, and I think that's going to be very difficult to get back. And then again, you're under new ownership as well. Like, it's all things start to become a bit interesting, I suppose, more like that. And I think that's the slight disappointment about Livingston this season, is they've not necessarily been particularly interesting, and they've not really done any of the things that we sort of expect from a Davy Martindale team. Does that seem a fair comment?
Yeah, I think that's very fair. I think that if there's one man you can trust to maybe turn it around, it would be David Martindale. And I think that's why we're seeing such early moves for the January transfer window. It shows that he is itching to make a couple of tweaks to this squad and to this team. And I think that, you know, a lot of people, when Livy came up last season and coming into this season, were like, oh, you know, don't expect the same sort of Livingston. You know, they've got ball players in there. They've got guys who can do that. And it's like, well, you know, maybe you should just be a big barrel of bastards and do what you do so well. And I think that, you know, striking that balance is so important for Livingston right now, with the amount of football that's left in this season and the even though they are beginning to pick up a couple of results, the teams above them are still very catchable. I still think it will be a really interesting race at the bottom to see who can stay up and who can sort of try and stave off the automatic relegation spot, because Livingston have shown next to nothing this season, if we're being totally honest. But we know that under David Martindale and with the squad of players that he has, if they do start to click, they can go on a run. And I think that it will be really interesting. I think that, and I've not listened to the post-match, but you can almost guarantee that teams like Livingston, Dundee, Kilmarnock will be saying, we are not going to judge ourselves on games against the top three teams in the country this season. It's going to give them a bit of confidence that they were able to create so many opportunities against one of the better teams in the league. And showing that they can get balls into the box and they can get Montano bursting forward and whoever else up there to support them as well. So despite the fact they lost 4-2, they conceded 4 at home, I think they'll still take a lot of confidence from it and be able to say, like, right, maybe use this as a marker in the sand and we can actually go and start attacking teams now and start trying to win games, because that's what a lot of us expected from Livingston, especially at the home of the Set Fair Arena at Almondvale this season. We expected them to be really tough to beat. They've not shown that so far, but I think that with the signings coming in and with, clear movement happening at the club, then we can start to say, right, okay, maybe Livingston will come back into it this season and really give people food for thought.
Grand. Robert, I think that's us up, and we'll pass across to whoever's next to talk about the remaining 2 other games they're doing, and then to other people with 2 more. So thanks, Robert.
Thanks, Duncan.
Bye-bye.
There were some cracking games in the weekend's Scottish Premiership action, and we are not going to talk about any of them in this Terrace podcast. Hello, my name is Craig Cairns, and to talk about these 2 matches that we're about to talk about, I am joined by Graeme Thewliss. Graeme, did you have a good Christmas?
I did have a good Christmas, mate. It was very pleasant. Spent a lot of time running around Lanarkshire and Livingston and various other things as well. But yes, it was all very good fun. It was all very sensible, and trying to wrangle a 5-year-old from smashing himself against a wall because he's so excited. But yes, it was all very good. How was yours, Craig?
Yes, but less of the sort of madness that you're describing there, and more of the sort of just catching up with the family stuff. It was good. It was, again, very sensible, but it was nice. Don't get many occasions to catch up with the whole family like that, so it was really nice. What about your weekend of football? How did that go?
I enjoyed watching a lot of it. I didn't enjoy a lot of the results of it in the grand scheme of things. Motherwell should have taken at least something from the game, which was the main thing. Let's get fat into that immediately, because that was just an incredibly frustrating hour and a half.
Yes, in true Sports Sound 2010s fashion, tonight we begin with Rangers and their 1-0 win against Motherwell at Ibrox, courtesy of a Theo Asgard goal. And it lifts Rangers above Motherwell in the table, Graeme. And I said at the top of the show there were some cracking games and we weren't going to talk about any of them. This game, despite the result, did seem to be quite a decent match with lots of chances at either end. Was it? I'm guessing from what you're saying there, the way you've teased it, Graeme, it wasn't exactly a fair outcome.
Ultimately, Motherwell don't score goals, so in that sense, yes, that's a fair outcome. If you don't score goals, then ultimately you don't take points out of games, you don't win games. Motherwell, I would say, probably had enough clear-cut chances in the first half to be out of sight by the second half. Unfortunately, a combination of various people not really taking their chances. Callum Hendry being one in particular who had a couple of really good chances, which he just couldn't quite put away. Tom Sparrow continues his weird Motherwell career of being sort of a middling squad player until he turns up at Ibrox and plays Rangers, at which point he immediately turns into like a very, very good Motherwell player. It's a very, very niche role to have. It's a sort of Dougie Arnott role from the 90s, but if we've got somebody who can just turn up, again, he had a chance in there as well. There was
Dougie Arnott had a chance.
I tell you what, Dougie Arnott would have put them away. That'd be no question. If we can get him out the wee thacket and into there, I think that'll sort us out, no bother at all. But just the second half, I would say Rangers had more of the game. But there was just a whole series of moments within the game, and it's been a little bit like that for Motherwell over the past few weeks, in that everything feels like it's either just marginally underhit, just marginally overhit, just half a yard away from where you want it to be. If it's half a yard short or if it's half a yard longer, depending on the situation, then you probably put yourself in a situation where you can't miss.
Mm-hmm.
But there's just the number of chances. Like, we are struggling to put teams away, and that's been the case all season long. And again, as always, it's impossible to be particularly critical of this Motherwell side, given kind of where we maybe anticipated we might be, anything like that at all, to be sitting. And as you say, we are literally post-Christmas and Rangers have just gone past us in the league.
Yeah.
Just silly. Very, very silly. What I would say in a wider context to the league in general, it does feel a bit like the festive period always feels like a sort of litmus test in terms of where you sit within the league.
How your squad handles being tested. Yes.
So you're sort of pushed to your limits in terms of the number of games you've played, and then also just how motivated are you? And it's not to suggest that anyone in the Motherwell squad isn't motivated, but in general, it feels like a real test of you. And we've kind of seen the bigger teams that you would expect more out of are now potentially showing that a little bit more. Aberdeen look better. Dundee United remain scrappy. St Mirren although they didn't win this weekend, they again look like they're improving. Rangers Celtic look marginally better than they have done. So Hibs obviously got their win at the weekend as well. Everyone, it feels that the better teams are maybe coming to the fore at this point of the season. It does ironically feel for Motherwell like a winter break would actually be incredibly useful for them this season. There's like ones in the past where ultimately like it's been useful for a different reason, and then it gives Motherwell 3 weeks to recruit Japanese match fixers and bring them in, things like that. It does feel like the squad could maybe just do with a fortnight of not having to play every single week, or having to play 2 games a week at this point in time.
What about now? Motherwell are renowned for giving strikers the best form of their career. Done it for a long, long time now. Too many to list. And I'll be honest, when I
can list them if you like. I can list them if you like.
It's a podcast in itself. And I have to admit, when I saw Callum Hendry coming in, I thought that he could potentially be the next one, because I think he showed a fair bit of potential when he was younger. Never quite happened for him. Maybe made the wrong move here and there. Maybe didn't quite live up to that potential. I mean, who knows exactly what the reasons were. But I expected him to at some point come in and be the next sort of surprise prolific Motherwell striker, but it doesn't seem to have, despite the chances, doesn't seem to. What's kind of gone wrong for him there?
On Hendry, with the 2 centre forwards that we have, I think ultimately from a Motherwell perspective, if you remember what Curtis Main did when it was the very brief period of sexy Motherwell with David Turnbull and Bole Aribi, and when Jake Hastie was actually good, Curtis Main played very much a kind of facilitator role within that side, and I do feel that to a degree that's what Hendry and Stamatolopoulos provide within this side, particularly when Maswinizi playing out on the right. Fingers crossed Zimbabwe lose their next game as well, and then we can get him home on the 5th of January.
And he doesn't get injured or anything.
At least he's played 2 minutes thus far, so yeah, well, I think we're doing well here.
But they might give him a chance now.
Absolutely no. Absolutely no interest, no thank you. Don't. To there's any Zimbabwe coaching staff listening, listen mate, it's fine. Hendry, so he does play more of a facilitator role, but with that, I would say that both him and Stamatolopoulos, both to a degree, need to be a bit more clinical than they are. It does feel Hendry, I've got the Saints mates who said this at the time when we signed them. They were like, listen, he will go for 15 games without scoring. He'll go 15 games, not only not scoring, but not actually giving any confidence that he'll ever score again. And then he'll go on like a 6 or 7 game run where he'll score every single game. And I would, if he goes from Christmas to the end of the season and scores like every second game, then he'll still end up as a very good Motherwell centre forward for the season. I actually don't think that's out with the realms of possibility either. Like, I do feel like if he can poke one home, regardless of kind of how it comes, it does feel like the sort of one that will turn it around, because he does give the impression right now that he is lacking confidence to a degree. And you could see that particularly with the chance that ended up, he had two chances kind of either side of the box, one on the right hand side, one on the left hand side, and both of them kind of looked that he was far too kind of hesitant and almost like overthinking what he should be doing with the finish, when in reality maybe just step on it and lash it. And yet you might put it 10 yards wide, the keeper might save whatever else, but actually just smashing one home from 3 yards out is maybe the difference at this moment in time. Like, I do feel like that I do feel like that would help enormously for him. I think he just needs a goal and that'll balance him out. Failing that, we actually saw a song come on in the second half, which is, he's been used very sparingly, and in his earlier appearances he looked like he struggled quite a bit, but he undoubtedly has a bit of pace and a bit of physicality that maybe Hendry and Stamatolopoulos don't have, but in terms of actual goal scoring prowess, we've kind of not really seen a huge amount on that front either from him. So we also have Sule, who I believe will come back as well, who looks absolutely rapid. So we should go into the second half of the season with various options in the forward area. And then obviously as well with Maswinizi, our top scorer, coming back. Hopefully we'll see a bit more out of him as well.
It's definitely been rough missing your top scorer. What about Rangers? A few changes again for them, a change of shape. They went to a back four rather than the back three that Rule seems to have favoured in recent times. How did they perform? There are a lot of shots. A couple of guys showed that they might have like a proper future at Rangers. Broadly, Asgard I thought was pretty good. Gassama was good until he wasn't. Like, he could have been hooked 10 minutes before he was, because you could see him blowing badly. Like, he'd put a lot into the game. I think almost the last sort of 10 minutes of the game is maybe the most reassuring thing for Rangers ultimately, in that seeing John Souttar come back, I think is a huge boon for them ultimately. The centre halves in Fernandes and Sterling did okay, but there were moments in the game where they were just doing weird stuff. Again, not good, bad, and different necessarily. Definitely weird, definitely odd choices in there as well. Barron had a good game as well on Saturday as well. Will seems to like him. He seems to like having his dig around other sort of football players. He seems to, I know he's maybe was definitely not the best player in the Rangers squad, but he definitely gives you something that maybe a few of the others don't in there.
I think if you take away some of the responsibility of finding the passes, playing passes for him, and just let him do what he's actually good at, simply being a good manager and focusing on the things that your players, focusing on the things that your players can bring to the game as opposed to what they cannot bring to the game, is very useful. Within that as well, though, there are some players who I would say kind of struggled, particularly Magoma didn't look up to much. Chermiti again really, I thought really struggled to really get involved in the game particularly, and you see him almost take like a half decent touch in the middle of the Motherwell half, for example, and maybe steps away from someone and then just lashes a pass like 10 yards wide of whatever his intention was in there as well. And he's a big unit and puts himself about a good bit, but it just looks like a real, like, quite distinct lack of quality. And it's been I realise there's a kind of ongoing gag basically around him at this point, and you always kind of feel a sort of degree of sympathy around players going through things like that as well. But like, when you look at what he was brought in to replace, particularly in terms of like, well, you nudged Big Cyril out the door, in order to replace him with Chermiti, who was significantly more expensive. I doubt he's on any significantly less wages.
20 goals and it wasn't good enough. I remember they were moaning after he had scored 10 goals last season. I remember being at Ibrox and he had just scored his 10th goal of the season, I think it was, in a 1-0 win over Hearts. And it was around that time where he was like missing tons of chances but still scoring. And I was like, Hearts were pathetic at that point. And I was like, come on, you're moaning about a 10 goal. Hearts were bottom of the league at the time. And I was like listening to these guys moan about a guy who had just scored his 10th goal in October or something like that.
And this is kind of this is the thing that would worry me most about Chermiti, in that Dessers knew what he was meant to do. I would say, like, Dessers put himself in the right position.
Score goals.
He would also score goals, and like you say, he would miss a lot of chances, but he was doing things. He would getting yourself in, getting yourself in the right position, but missing the chance. Okay, not great, but I would rather you were there doing the right things and then missing the chance than looking quite as far off it. Like, I don't feel like Chermiti's even putting himself into the right spots to score goals. He's marginally involved in the game, and I think that's the biggest problem with it as well. That's it. As I say, like Suter back is a huge win. Barron's continued domestic form is a boon for them in there as well. And like, it did feel like if Rangers were going to score, it was going to come from not so much a Motherwell mistake, but kind of like a second ball, almost like a secondary chance from somebody having a go. And that's ultimately how it kind of played out in there as well. Motherwell kind of sleeping a bit at the back post to see it poked home.
Yeah, I am not suggesting that Rangers couldn't have done better than Cyril Dessers, but I don't know. Maybe keep him and get somebody else. Upgrade on him while he's still there. You know what I mean? Somebody better than Chermiti and Miovski or something like that, which I know is easier said than done, but still, I found it quite weird, especially with hindsight halfway through this season, that they've chased the guy out the door who scored so many goals and they've replaced them with folk who don't score goals. It's hilarious. It's hilarious at the same time. But yes, let's move on. I think we've spent enough time on that one, and we will move on to Dens Park, where Dundee beat Falkirk 1-0, courtesy of a Jan Danda penalty deep into first half injury time. That's Dundee now 7 points clear of bottom place Livingston, albeit they've played one game more. Are Dundee going to be okay, Graeme? And I say that not just because of the league placing, but because of Livy and Kilmarnock, but also because Dundee have shown, even before this game, and we'll get to Falkirk, I don't think Falkirk are in a really rough patch at the moment, so I don't think it's the same as like them beating Celtic at home, for instance, or them getting a point at Ibrox. But Dundee have shown, amidst a run of dross results and not even attempting to score a goal away from home, it seems, that they can still pick up enough results here and there to keep them anywhere near from getting cut adrift, which I have to say, going into the season, when we were asked to do our predictions and stuff, wasn't the end of the transfer window or anything yet, but at Dundee at the bottom, I was worried about this squad. So, I mean, are they going to be okay, Graeme?
I think so. Like, I think they'll be okay on the basis that I think Livy, although they seem to be looking to be active in the January transfer window, and I think they need that. Livy I'm not convinced that Livy, even at this stage of the season, can go out and pick up 7 more points than Dundee between now and the end of the season. Like, if Dundee avoid defeat against Livingston between now and the end of the season, I think that's them safe. Like, I would be surprised to see that many wins from Livingston, or even draws from Livingston, in order to allow them to overhaul. They say it's a 7-point gap just now, and they've played a game more. It just feels like quite a lot. Like, unless Livy can win their game Livy win their game, I'd be surprised to see Dundee fall into the relegation spot. And I think broadly, there'll be worst case scenario, you end up in the playoff. It's not going to be the end of the world being there. It would almost certainly be Partick Thistle that they face off against that point as well. And again, the Stephen Presley appointment, it's been done to death. It was strange. It remains strange. Everything at Dundee feels slightly off kilter. It almost feels like there's a wider series of events happening off the field, which is subsequently affecting it on the field. I've no idea what that is, but it's Dundee, so it's probably weird. But I think they'll probably do enough to at least finish 11th in the game as well. There's been a couple of shoots of or green shoots at Dundee over the past few weeks. Danda getting a run of games looks more comfortable in there as well. Really big fan of Graeme at centre half, and Billy Cometio as well looks as if he's had a very sort of up and down Dundee career to date. Like, there's been points where he just doesn't look capable at the level, but at the same time, it was a big game from him on Saturday. He was very good, and him and Graeme look like a good, sensible partnership in there. If they can keep the two of them fit and together and playing together, I think they'll benefit from that there as well. I think we've all sort of admired Congreve a little bit in there as well. So there's just like small shoots of recovery in there as well. And I don't expect them to be incredibly active in January, but the 11 that started on Saturday, if you could maybe add one even player to that, there's guys in Wright, Graeme, Cometio, Hamilton, Danda, Hay, Congreve. If you add maybe one more to that, then that begins to look like a slightly more functional team. And again, if their only intention between now and the end of the season is to try and not lose away games and try and win home games, like, worse teams than that have stayed up, like, ultimately in there as well. Like, yeah, an improvement, I would say, just quietly, really quietly, because I'm aware that they're about to play a derby.
Yeah, I would echo some of that. I mean, I think that maybe like a fullback or two and a striker or something, and then all of a sudden that's looking not too bad. Danda looking a bit better, getting games in his actual position. Congreve, we've spoken about a fair bit on this podcast this season. Yogan seems to have come on a bit of a game in recent times as well. Hamilton has been one of the better players in that midfield as well. So it seems like they've got the centre of the field more or less. You'll
note that neither of us mentioned John McCracken there, who on Saturday had one of the more interesting goalkeeper performances we've seen this season.
It's just John McCracken though. He was doing that last season where it was like,
hold your hands up. See, when you get a clean sheet, it's a clean sheet. It doesn't matter how you get a clean sheet, and no one needs to know how you got a clean sheet.
Can't remember what game it was last season, but there was one game last season where it was just like he had decided, I'm going to be a midfielder for a few minutes, and it was he's just like, sometimes he's just got that, and other times he looks like he got into the Scotland squad at one point. No, I know the competition's not that great for Scotland goalkeepers at the moment, but he still showed enough form to catch the eye of Steve Clarke and get called up.
Modelling your goalkeeping style on like John McGinn. Like, that doesn't make any sense, mate. What do you think?
Exactly. Yeah, he learned a bit too much when he was away in that international camp. But maybe a goalkeeper as well then. Maybe a goalkeeper as well would be a shout.
I hope not, because it's very good fun.
Aye, I know. Let's move on to Falkirk. This wasn't the greatest game by all accounts, and I think Falkirk contributed to that. Lots of attempts at goal, 23, only one of them hit the target. As I said, they're in a bit of a sticky spell. John McGlynn said after they lost to Hearts that they weren't there yet. They weren't there yet because they just come out of a tough run of games, and they weren't there yet to compete with the teams that are at the top of the league, basically. And he said they had more winnable games coming up, and they've won one of those against Kilmarnock, lost the other one here. But I honestly can't remember if I'm repeating something I've said on the show before, or whether it's just in conversations with you guys elsewhere. But I was a bit surprised that people changed their mind on Falkirk so quickly. I still thought it was jumping the gun a wee bit, because I still thought one of the things you said to kick off the show about this is the time when teams really get tested.
It's the other side of that coin, basically, in there as well.
And Falkirk's squad was always going to be one of the ones that got tested, that didn't have as much depth as some others. And they've had horrendous injury issues when you think about it. And it was amazing that they sustained the form for as long as they did. And I know, and still in the context of the whole season, I might still be sounding a bit negative overall about Falkirk, but I do still worry for them a little bit. And I do think that the next couple of months is going to be a big test and will go a long way to determining whether they do get dragged down a bit or whether they can set their sights on a push for the top 6 or something like that.
I think John McGlynn needs to get back in tracksuits only. Like,
Canada Goose not doing it for him.
Yeah, it's certainly not doing it for me. But John McGlynn's a tracksuit manager.
Get the hats back on.
Get the hat back on.
Plural, Graeme.
Craig, we're not allowed to make jokes about that. He needs to be standing on the touchline looking like he's been dragged through the club shop. Like I'm not suggesting that's why Falkirk's form has dropped to a degree. I'm also not suggesting that that's not the case as to why their form has dropped to a degree. John McGlynn's a tracksuit manager. Be a tracksuit manager. Like,
it perfectly correlates, though.
I'm just asking questions, mate. I'm just asking questions.
But yeah, I mean, I don't. They've. It depends a lot, as well as we were talking about Dundee, about the work that they do in the transfer window. And I think one thing they could definitely do with is a striker with the continued absence of Ross McKeever. I don't think Graham's quite up to delivering week in, week out, or sometimes twice a week that's needed.
There's no chance that I was ever what the intention was with Brian Graham. There's no chance they picked him up in the summer and went, Brian Graham, he's going to be the number 9 that's going to be leading the line for Falkirk for. And then 6 games out of 7 or whatever it is. Like, they need a body, and a warm and faintly effective body, I think, will improve them.
And then
they feel in a sort of similar boat to Motherwell as well. It's like a January break would actually benefit them enormously. Like, it just looks like it's all just a wee bit hard at the moment, and all the things that had looked very good early on in the season had been very surprising early on in the season. They're just not quite clicking in the way that you want them to. And like I said earlier with us as well, I do think it's just the sheer number of games they're having to play one after another. You get no time to not only just rest and recuperate, but also like do a bit of thinking in terms of like, this is what we want to do, and these are the things that we're lacking, and these are the things that we need to improve in, because it's just so constant just now as well. And bigger teams, bigger squads can absorb that in a way that Falkirk can't, in a way that Motherwell can't, in a way that other the smaller sides within there as well. So Falkirk can't. Again, yeah.
I was just going to add that Agyeman gives you, he's not naturally a number 9, he gives you different attributes he can run in behind and stuff, but it's such a drop off if he's your backup number 9. Let's finish off by talking about the incident that decided the game. I mean, I think the 2 red card incidents, they were ultimately the right decisions. I think it was right that Brad Spencer was overturned. I think Murray can't have any complaints, and if there's one player in Scottish football that does not need to be challenged like that, is Ethan Ross. He does not need any more injury issues. Thank you very much.
More than anything else, like the Murray one, I have a degree of sympathy for him, because it was one of those ones when I was watching it back, you knew it was coming from the moment that Murray, as soon as the ball breaks, you see him pelting back. And Murray's been a bit of a frustrated figure this year, and I actually thought he was just going to steam into somebody because I hadn't seen it. But the moment he cut to that clip, you could see the way in which he's running back, like, oh, this is the red card. You can see it from 10 yards away. In the end, that's an unfair judgment on him, basically, as well, because it was as much as anything a fancle of legs in there as well. And I have a degree of sympathy for him because there's no malice in it at all. But at the same time, that looked incredibly fucking painful.
Like, he could potentially snap his ankle. Yeah, so, I think...
It is a red card, but I have sympathy for him in that respect.
No, I agree. I wasn't trying to imply that there was any malice or anything. It's just that I don't think he can have any complaints. The one where I think there was some maybe argument to be had was the penalty decision. For me, it's a real borderline one. I don't know what you think, Graeme. I feel like I can totally understand and see why it's been given. He jumps and he turns his back, and there's an element of his ball moving, not intentionally, but his arm sort of like coming across and blocking the ball. But at the same time, it's just, for me, it's like borderline for something that I don't want to see punished, because I feel like the player is not really doing too much wrong or egregious, and it just feels like quite a harsh punishment for something like that. I don't know what you feel about it.
I think that one is a penalty. I think jumping with your arms, like, I know it's like,
but he's like trying to. The thing is, he's trying to tuck it in. I'm just honestly just saying that I'm unsure about it. But he's trying to bring it in. But I don't know.
To your point, in terms of trying to bring it in, and he's not. Yeah, like, he's trying to do it.
I suppose.
So, like, you are jumping with your arms sticking out the way, and again, not an expert. Miles from an expert on it. Would never purport to be an expert. But to me, when you're jumping, it is a strike on goal. It is a strike that is headed towards goal. He's jumped and stuck his arm out. And as much as he's trying to bring it in, and that feels a wee bit unfair because he's doing his absolute best to not do that, he has done it. So almost by the answer of, well, he almost got it in. Well, it's a penalty then because he didn't. Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. I mean, as I said, I wasn't 100% on it either way. I was willing to listen to arguments for it, a case for it either way. I just, even if it is a penalty, I still think it's a wee bit harsh on the guy because I say I don't like to see people punished for doing something sort of unintentionally wrong. And I know we've just said the same about Simon Murray.
Simon Murray's, yeah.
At the same time, he's still been careless in the way that he's sort of gone into that challenge. So maybe argue the same about this handball. Anyway, I think we've come to the conclusion that it's not black and white. I think that's the one conclusion that we've come to.
Also, right, this is a really weird shirt matchup in this game.
Oh my God. What's the point in having a third kit if it just looks like a home kit? And it's
really
just,
that was my main gripe with this game. Not the sort of relatively low quality of football on offer, but just the shirt matchup in this game was weird and annoying. I didn't like that. Don't care for it. Don't do it again, please.
Yeah. Looked like orange was burning through the blue. That's what it looked like from a distance. Strange.
Don't say that.
Strange.
Don't say that.
I know. Let's get out of here before we do any more damage. I think we've spent enough time on that, although it's difficult to tell with a big edit. There's going to have to be locked out about how much we've actually talked about it. Graeme, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Craig.
And thanks to everybody for listening and for your continued support. We will see you all again soon.
Bye.
Hello and welcome to the third and final part of this festive season, lost week, whatever you want to call it, special from the Terrace Scottish Football Podcast, where I think it's Duncan McKay put it in part one. We have brought you a smorgasbord of Terrace Podcast members, representatives, analysts, FUDs, whatever you want to call it, over to cover the 6 games which took place in the Scottish Premiership at the weekend. We had Duncan and Rob talking through the Edinburgh Derby and Celtic's victory over Livingston. Then we had Craig Cairns and Graeme talking about Rangers' narrow win over Motherwell and Dundee managing to get 3 points against Falkirk. And now finally we come to these last 2 games. And incredibly, I thought this when I laid it out, I thought, okay, there's a possibility that could we end up breaking Terrace rules by having a 0-0 somewhere in the middle. But no, the football gods smiled upon us. I mean, it would have been better if there was no 0-0s at the weekend, but they have smiled upon us. It means that we have a 0-0 to, as Terrace tradition, finish the show on, which will be, of course, St Mirren's 0-0 draw with Killie, but we'll get to the 1-1 draw between Aberdeen and Dundee United at Pittodrie first. And helping me to do that, Craig Fowler, is my host. Sorry, is my guest for today, not my host. My guest for today. Just while you're not hosting, because not only have you not got a camera, as it's not working on your laptop for some reason, but you're also brutally hungover. And that's Thom Watt.
Yes, hello. Yes, but all of the above is true. I tried to take the edge off with a lunchtime cocktail, and it has not helped whatsoever. So no, here in body, if not in picture or mind. But we'll see how it goes. What's the worst that could happen?
I've decided that this year, and I think you may be able to attest to this year is my final year when I try to have my cake and eat it too this time of year. I was able to do it when I was younger. I was able to work through it while still getting on it, and we just fire through. I'm too old now. I'm going to turn 40 in 2026, and I've decided that less for physical health. Physical health is not the actual worst part of it. It's more the mental health as you get older. When you're putting yourself through the ringer for all these various Christmas festive parties that you end up having, gatherings you have with friends and family and blah, 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 whilst also trying to cram in work around about it, it's just made me more stressed than I think it's actually worth. So in future, I'm either going to work through, say I need to save the holidays, I'm just going to work through it and not commit to many of these things, or what I'd like to do instead is just take 2 weeks off.
I think that latter sounds like a really good idea. I've had 2 weeks off, but it just means that you've got 2 weeks off to misbehave.
I like misbehaving though. I like misbehaving when I've got nothing on. I'm quite good at it.
Good luck with that path. I've tried and failed, and it's my birthday tomorrow, and I'm older than you, and it's never. I've promised myself several times that I'm just going to be good over Christmas, and
okay, then in that case, maybe every year I'll just take 2 weeks off instead. Just make the Terrace podcast go dark over the Christmas period. We've done it in other years. Just said, everybody's too busy. Listen to the Patreon, the stuff on there. Do that. But anyway, let's get to these two games because me and you have another podcast. Speaking of the Patreon, to record for after this that is non-football related. But Thom, let's begin with the 1-1 draw between Aberdeen and Dundee United at Pittodrie. Goals from Amar Fata and Jesper Karlsson meant this ended up a share of the spoils. And Thom, I think it stuck out for me watching the highlights. Nicky Devlin making a bit of an error, it has to be said, for the Dundee United goal, which put Dundee United 1-0 up. And I've noticed something this season with regards to Nicky Devlin, that there's very much a kind of divide amongst the Aberdeen support as to whether he is one of the better, one of the more important members of the team, or whether he is somebody that, like a lot of players in a team that's, obviously kind of struggling has struggled. I think it's fair to say maybe has improved this season, but has struggled over the course of the first half of the Scottish Premiership season relative to expectations, that Devlin is another one of a few players that Aberdeen fans think they should be looking to upgrade on in the near future. Where do you fall on that? Where do you fall on the Nicky Devlin divide?
I think, slightly diplomatically, I think he's one of the better players who just hasn't been able to play in a position that is his natural position. Ironically, making a bit of a hash of it while Aberdeen went back to 4-2-3-1, maybe doesn't back up that argument, but I think as an all-round footballer, he is one of the better in the top 11 footballers that we currently have. I'm not convinced that his long-term prospects are to be part of a back three, but he does offer an awful lot in the kind of organisational side of things and bring the ball out as part of that. I think if Nicky Devlin was the first, put it this way, if Nicky Devlin was the biggest problem that we had, we'd be a lot further up the league. You could probably go through a fair list of players that look like they need an upgrade or haven't got to where they should be before you get to him.
So looking at this game overall, from what I read about it, it seemed quite kind of symptomatic of both these teams this season. So it seemed to be that Aberdeen, first half, or maybe even first 60 minutes, had a lot of the ball, had a lot of the territory, didn't do enough with it, probably didn't move it quickly enough. Dundee United score from a mistake at the back. Aberdeen then get themselves level, and instead of kicking on and going on to win the game, it's then Dundee United's turn to start to finally kind of come out of their shell, probably is a way of putting it from what I read about the match, And in the end, it's kind of like a share of the spoils with some good, some bad, but overall, each fan base not entirely content.
Fair, I think. It was weird because it was pretty much one-way traffic. It looked like Dundee United didn't really want to come and play, which was weird because when they did, after Aberdeen scored and it was 1-1, they were definitely on the front foot. They definitely had the momentum. But up until that point, even when they scored through the mistake you mentioned, they didn't change the system. I mean, and up until that point, they'd just been under the cosh is probably the wrong way of putting it, because it wasn't like wave after wave of attack. They just couldn't get the ball. Were moving side to side. It looked like there was promising positions without there being clear-cut chances. And then they scored, and that pattern just fell back into that pattern again. I think that's it, though. I think it's like, do you? On one hand, it doesn't do Dundee United any favours in the league at the moment. They're still not where they would like to be. They're looking like their form, certainly after the first couple of weeks of the season, has tailed off, and they're in the bottom six. But it was a pretty spirited draw. And another way of looking at it is, I think, 6 points from 4 games, and that includes a win over Celtic. And similarly for Aberdeen, it doesn't necessarily do them any favours in trying to climb the league or silence any of the doubters over changing systems, changing players, which didn't really seem to make sense when some of the players that had played well against Celtic were on the bench. But at the same time, 1 loss in 8 is a fairly good run of form. I think the acid test will be it's Hibs, Falkirk, and then a home and away doubleheader against Rangers, and we'll know an awful lot more about whether the mini revival over the last 8 games or not is a real deal, or if it's just that they happen to be playing the teams down at the bottom of the league. Yeah, so kind of symptomatic for Dundee United. Looked like they didn't have an awful lot of confidence, ironically, until Aberdeen scored, and they were like, well, we probably should roll our sleeves up and do something about this. Aberdeen had nearly 75% of the possession throughout the game, but other than the goal, there was maybe only one fairly good chance that was created. So yeah, and I think it's a bit of the Thielen enigma of when he's winning games, downplaying things is great, and not explaining in great detail what the plan was is fine, because you're kind of riding just when you're not winning games, or when there was kind of what looked like a lack of cohesion in things. Not explaining what the thinking was can be a bit frustrating. So yeah, it's kind of a frustrating one, but not. You can't get too. It felt very much like 2 points dropped, because it looked like Dundee United haven't had a good run of things. They've got a terrible record at Pittodrie. I don't think they've won in it's years since they've won at Pittodrie. So it felt like a good opportunity to win, especially given the run of games coming up is pretty tough. But it's not. We're still weirdly up at the top. I think second in the overall form table. So just hard to know too much about it, but we'll know in 3 weeks, I think.
Yeah, on United, they just kind of showed what we've known for weeks. And I mean, a few members of this podcast have known since the start of the season that they need a new goalkeeper, because Dave Richards, again, just not covered himself in glory, and he is kind of seen as a lesser of two evils at this point in time. There are rumours that they are going to sign somebody else in January, and you'd have to imagine that will come to the fore. Whether whoever they pick up next is an improvement at all remains to be seen. I think they're kind of interesting from their point of view. David Namo playing at the right wing back position. He's not been seen that often this season, but when he has, he seemed to have played quite well. Like, I remember him playing, I think it was actually even left wing back against Hearts at Tynecastle, where United got that draw, and the longer that game went on, the more kind of impressive team they looked. And he's kind of quietly making a case, or maybe not so quietly if you're a United fan, but for the kind of wider Scottish football public, quietly making a case to be their starting right wing back, because Ryan Strain, just kind of in general, he's had moments, but in general, has not been the signing that a lot of people thought he would be for United. And I think the other thing to note for them is just kind of looking at the kind of comments for United fans and the way that they set up in this team and kind of how the game went in terms of, being in the ascendancy, playing a lot better, getting a bit more possession after United scored and it was back to one each. But for a huge chunk of the game, they're just kind of going long. And it kind of, on paper, it kind of makes sense because you're missing a couple of centre midfielders. You're missing Pan Kamara. You're missing Lucas Stevenson. Arguably, they're two best centre midfielders. And you've also got Sapsford, you've got Fata, kind of not really wingers, but kind of inside forwards, guys capable of attacking the box. So, okay, best way to get these pieces is to go long to them, to go long to the forwards and then play for there. But Max Waters, it's not looked like anything since he came back from his injury. And even at the start of the season, he was scoring goals, but he wasn't doing much else. Maybe apart from that, he's maybe not the kind of archetypal target man that they'd want. He's more somebody who gets on the end of chances rather than kind of huds the ball up and brings others into play as a facilitator. And then you've got Nikolai Muller, who's not really shown much at all. So kind of, I don't know, it's a tough one where I'm kind of looking at this and thinking, right, the game plan that Goodwin's gone with does make sense. But on the other hand, I can see why Dundee United fans are frustrated because the pieces don't fit together. And even if you're not blaming Goodwin in a vacuum, you can blame him for the recruitment in the summer. But Tom, before we move on to the final game, just one more thing I wanted to ask you about Aberdeen, and this regards the forward position. So you've got Marko Lazatic, you've got Kevin Nisbet. On the face of it, pretty set there for a team that only plays one up front. But as I wrote in my column last week for the Herald, it's kind of the unique thing about the striker position is that even when you've got bodies in the door, you think, everybody can look at them and say, they should be fine. Not always the case, because it's the most kind of demanding position on a football field. And if you're getting anything that's below par, then fans are going to be like, no, we need to go out, we need to sign somebody else. And I think the problem with them too, Lazatic has definitely got the kind of general kind of footballer makeup that I think in maybe even one, but certainly 2, 3, 4 years' time, he'll have the ability to dominate games with his back to goal, but also provide that goal-scoring touch. But he's not scored many this season. Kevin Nisbet, seen in the past, can certainly score in the Scottish Premiership. However, he doesn't really fit the system that well under Jimmy Tillene. And there was hope for him towards the second half of last season, but that's not translated into this season. So do Aberdeen need to sign another forward in January?
Yeah, I think so. Not least because the obvious plan A was Yengi, the lesser spotted.
Keep forgetting he's still there.
I mean, he was clearly the guy that we went out and got first of all as the plan A. Big guy, strong guy, surprisingly fast, just can't take a touch and doesn't look like he's ever played football in the times that he's appeared on a football pitch for us. So yeah, I think it's the single biggest issue is not creating anything for whoever it is that's there. Like, I think, as you said, Lazatic is 21, 22 years old, he's got a footballing brain and is doing the right things, but this is the first season that he'll ever have had of playing regularly at any kind of level. He's going to be a good player. It just might not be ready for him to be leading the line on his own yet. Nisbet's a bit of an enigma. The goals that he has scored have been brilliant. The misses he's had from surprisingly easy chances have been incredibly frustrating. He should have more than he has so far this season. So I still think it's ideally would be to find somebody who fits the systems, whether those are whether that is the what was preferred at the start of the season of the 4-2-3-1 and have the target man striker who the kind of pace and trickery roundabout can do something with, or if it's the sort of whatever you want to call it, 3-6-1, which we have kind of made work in more recent weeks. The frustrating thing is, for all the creative players on the pitch, they tend to be creative players who want to score goals rather than creative players that want to create an awful lot. But I think, as you said, everyone in the league wants a number 9, and we're no different.
Right, let's get to our final game, shall we? And that was, as I mentioned earlier, St Mirren 0, Kilmarnock 0. So we won't spend a lot of time on this because we've had dreadful problems with technology today. It always seems to happen in this period between Christmas and New Year when Wi-Fi and laptops just... They're having it as well. They're having the Christmas period when they're trying to work and also trying to have fun clearly at the same time, and are just not working properly. But anyway, yeah, the 0-0 in this game. To start with St Mirren, I watched a fair chunk of this one and also kind of read up the feelings of the fans. I think the disappointing thing for St Mirren is that they're kind of stuck in this. They're still stuck a wee bit in this kind of... malaise is too strong a word, but I think you'll know what I mean when I say that they're looking to prove that they are not a team that has to be concerned about the bottom 3 this season. And I think that's what everybody's assuming, and that's what all the fans are assuming, and that's what I'm assuming. I'm not going to do a handbrake turn here and say, oh no, I actually think St Mirren might end up getting relegated, because I don't. But as the season keeps rolling along, you're continually looking at them and thinking, why are they not further up the table? And it's now getting to a period where there is maybe a little bit of concern that they constantly, well, I think they will still be too good to finish in the bottom 3. You don't want to be in a position as a fan, especially in a season like this one, when you've got the glory of a League Cup win, to be constantly looking over your shoulder for the rest of the campaign and wondering what's going to come behind you. Because now there's only 2 points between them and Dundee in 10th. Now, they do have 2 games in hand, but it's just one of those games that's kind of frustrating, this one. Like, you're playing at home against a team below you in the league who have now not won in 12 games. You're expecting to get 3 points there. And now you don't lose the game, so it's not a complete disaster, but it's another draw, and it's another game without St Mirren scoring a goal as well, which has happened too often this season in games where they've looked and had decent opportunities, but maybe not created anything too clear-cut and haven't managed to get the ball home. And that's now 15 league goals from 17 games, which is, if you look at their kind of League Cup campaign, like very much at odds with that. I know, like, a lot of games, obviously, in the group stages were against lower league opposition, but then you're talking like 4 goals against Motherwell and 3 goals against Celtic, and you're scoring against Hearts. And then matches like this where I've sound like a broken record. I've said it about St Mirren since near the start of the season. I just think they missed something else in midfield. I think they miss a Caelan Boyd-Monks type figure in there. And I don't think it's a huge surprise that they finally kind of looked like they were getting their act together in front of goal in the couple of games where Fraser-Taylor came in and started in that midfield. Now, I don't think Fraser-Taylor is necessarily a long-term option, especially not at this stage of his career, with his lack of Premiership overall kind of experience and minutes in his legs. But they need somebody like that. They need somebody that's a bit more, get their foot on the ball, calm things down. But they've almost, due to how well Richard King has played, which is now kind of demanded that he's part of the back 3, they've moved Alex Gogic into midfield. So they're almost solidifying the fact that they're not going to have this Caelan Boyd-Monks style player in the team. And there was something interesting in this one, and they went with Roland Aduwu, and I think that was just generally due to kind of who's available for this game. But he kind of made his money in the second half of last season and earned himself the permanent move by playing more. I think it was I can't remember if he was part of the midfield 3 or more as a 10. I have it in his head as he was more of a 10. Remind me of that, St Mirren fans. But he's not, regardless, he's not shown up really this season. He's not continued that form into this one. And they can also do with another player like that, somebody with a kind of bit of explosiveness to attack, to go beyond defenders, to give them a little bit something different. And I think they maybe doubled down too much on being St Mirren, and it's fine. They're not, like I said, they're not going to get relegated, but I think it's now 7 points between them and the top 6. Like I say, games in hand, but as a league campaign, it's starting to look like this is going to end up being a wee bit of a disappointment after 3 successive top 6 finishes, And with it being a league that's been so wide open that if they maybe did have that missing piece, or if their forwards who can be like, every one of them has got, like, in total they've got 17 goals between the 3 starting forwards, but only 7 of those have been in the league. So if they were able to translate a bit more of that, they can then look at themselves and say, this is going to be a 4th successive top 6 finish, and with everything is wide open, you'd be looking at as high as you can possibly get. But it just seems like they can't quite get out of this rut, which means they're still in the bottom 4 of the league.
I think that they're a weird one, because there is no way that looking at them, even the league games, even like how close the games have been when they've lost games, they're always competitive, that you would not have put them anywhere near where they look like they are, well, where they are in the league at the moment. But I think the worrying thing with that is when you're coming into January, Livingston are going to do business, Dundee are going to do business. Who knows? Like, Kilmarnock will have a new manager and will change things. And at the moment, it looks like there's one very clear team that is the worst team in the league, and there are 2 very clear teams that are the 2nd and 3rd worst team in the league, like very, very clearly. But the fact that there's only a handful of points in there, that is one good signing. That is a good managerial bounce for the new whoever comes in. Like that turns around pretty quickly, and then you get into the situation that if they can win the games in hand, and then the season looks entirely different. But I think the nature of a bottom 6 scrap when there's only a handful of points in it and you're not scoring goals is a worry. It is a worry, and I think both of our clubs have seen it. That you think around about this time of the season, we will kick on. We will just get a couple of wins together, and the momentum will build, and then we'll be fine, and we'll be in with a chance of the top 6. Sometimes that happens. More often than not, you run out of games, and I think that's where they need to be worrying.
Yeah, and I suppose some Mirren fans listeners will say, well, you've not mentioned the fact that they've been screwed over by referees so many times this season, because they're now whipping themselves up into a frenzy every time on social media after games. This one, like the call against Lions in the second half, I think that's fine. I think it's pretty cut and dried. His arm is down, it's close to his body. I think you're getting penalties for that. It's a bit of a farce. The one in the first half, I think it's David Watson. It's strange because he essentially tackles the ball with his hand. Like that's the first thing that gets to the ball. Like it's a duo he's going up against, and it's like he slides in, and the only thing that makes contact with the ball is his hand. So I can certainly see in certain situations now. I think it's in the rules where a player's down and their hands on the ground and they're using it to support themselves and it hits his hand. It's not a penalty. However, I think we see so many times with the guidelines and the rules, there's certain interpretations of them. I think you're going to see, if you replayed that incident, I think you would get penalties given by other referees, and that's the potluck element of it. And if you're using VAR, it shouldn't be potluck, but it is, because that's the nature of the sport, and that's why it's a big waste of money.
Yeah, I think I was having a discussion with somebody about this yesterday. You would have thought that from that, especially around handball and in trying to make it more clear cut, and in trying to add layers to the rules to make it less nuanced, it's just becoming more and more effectively down to the interpretation of the individual referee and who's in the VAR booth. I don't think I've seen a decision, maybe less so in Scotland, but I don't think I've seen a decision in like the English Premier League this season for a VAR on a handball that I would bet my house would be given. And that's, with all the money in the world and all eyes on it. So, I mean, yeah, St Mirren do have a right to feel aggrieved. They have had a lot that's gone against them. They do seem to be practicing free kicks where they all stand in offside situations.
I think they've gone away from that. I think they've
moved away. At the start, a lot of the grievances were felt to be like somewhat self-inflicted. But no, I think yeah, you can point to these things, but they had their chances, and they're up against a holding pattern manager in a team that is bereft of confidence. You need to be winning those games.
Yeah. And quickly, that's a quick note on Kelly just to finish. Like because it's hard to go in too much on them, because we don't know how quickly things are going to change with them getting a new boss in or whatever. And like you say, it's just kind of holding pattern stuff. So recently, Chris Dolan has changed them back to the 4 at the back. I think that's a big positive you can look at. As I said earlier, it's 12 games without a win now. Not great, but for a team that haven't won in so long, they can really be encouraged by their first half performance. They didn't look like a side like that void in confidence. They were the side initially that kind of took the game to St Mirren. In the end, like if the half had finished 2 each, that probably would have been a bit fair enough. Killie went in their shell a little bit more in the second period, but again, if you've not won in so long, that's just an inevitability. The more the game goes on, the more that it's on a knife edge at 0-0. But from the back line, the player that's really kind of stood out is Ethan Schultz-Brown. Not somebody I was hugely familiar with before the start of this season, but he's come in recently and he's looked quite good. He's been starting instead of Robbie Dees. You would have thought going to the back 4, right, they'll just have Dees and Mayo there, and the two of them, but Dees has been woefully out of form, so he's kind of been dropped, probably even for his own good. And Schultz-Brown has been excellent at the back. He was probably Killie's standout player for this one, winning the vast majority of his headers against the forward line. It's not easy to win headers against. The negatives were just the usual. Like, they had Tyrese John Jules in the wing. He did do things at times. Like, he's got something in him where they could be a bit of that kind of chaos factor-esque. He can get opposing defenders on their back foot, but he's not a winger. They're lacking much else in the way of creativity in the wide areas from the number 10 spot. Tom Lowry hasn't played a whole full lot. This season he had a decent first half, but fell away from things. And the fullbacks still aren't really that good enough either. If you're looking at James Brown and Dominic Thompson, so they were a problem because they were playing as wing backs in a 3 at the back system, and you're relying on them a lot. You move to a 4 at the back, you think, okay, we don't have to rely on them quite as much. However, if you're playing in a team in a 4-3-3 that's got a winger on one side and Greg Kiltie on the other, who again, not a winger, then you're going to have to rely on your fullbacks to get forward and provide something. And I don't think they've quite got it. So just kind of more of the same for Killie. Like, best way to put it, they're in a holding pattern, waiting on a new manager getting announced, waiting on some more signings coming in the January window alongside a new manager, hopefully a good manager, and then we can kind of take stock of them from there and see where they're at. Currently 11th of the table, and not ideal that Dundee got that victory to take themselves now 3 points ahead of them. Right, Tom, that'll do us.
Sounds good.
Thank you very much for joining me, and thank you to everybody for listening to this episode of the podcast. Something a little bit different, not something that we plan to do very often, but just something that kind of made a bit more sense with the Christmas period and not everybody having time to see matches, but obviously people like Graeme watching Motherwell, like Robert and Duncan watching Hearts, like Thom watching Aberdeen, guys who were able to watch their own side. So regardless, hope you enjoyed it. And for coming up this week, Telfer and Sean will be back with another lower league show. And then after that, we'll be back with a normal, kind of probably what will likely be a more normal Premiership roundup next week. There is Premiership midweek games. We are not going to cover them on the main show, but there will be a Patreon out either on Hogmanay or on New Year's Day. So be sure to check that out. That will be on patreon.com/Terrace Podcast when it is released. But until next time, for those of you who maybe don't listen to the Lower League show, have a happy new year when it comes. And for the Premiership, we will talk to you again in 2026. Cheers.